Is anybody out there? Anybody?
We are College Hill Farm. Welcome back to College Hill Farm. Today we're doing our series on casual and contemporary prepping. Now, last week we did our series about finding your perfect homestead. Now, you've looked and you've looked and you've looked and you've looked and you finally found that perfect place. You put your payment in, all the paperwork signed, you gave up your first child, okay? It's yours. You're ready to move on your new homestead. Well, what I'd like to talk about today are some of those things that you may have never thought about when it comes to setting up a homestead. There are lots of stuff that can get in the way as you do your homestead, and some mistakes are more costly and time consuming than others are. And that's what we're going to talk about today, how to avoid some of those very, very costly mistakes in setting up your perfect homestead. If you've never lived off of the land, or you've never been around where homesteading was going on, maybe your grandparents did it, maybe your parents did it, but you've never really, after you became an adult, did anything like that. Well, there are some rules that people who weren't raised in this lifestyle really know or really don't know, but they should know, and it will help them a lot when they start on their homestead journey. Now, is this a complete list? No. I don't know every in and out. As a matter of fact, your property will cause things on this list to not work for you. But there are things that you should definitely consider as you work towards your homestead. Number one, when you've got your homestead ready, every piece of ground should have a plan for it. Now, it's going to take you a while to get every piece of the plan going. As a matter of fact, it's easy to get too many irons in the fire at the same time. So when you're making your plan, make your plan about kind of more of a bulleted list rather than I'm going to do this, 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 and this. Make it a bulleted list and mark the things off your list as you get to them. And try and do them in some kind of logical order. All right, garden rows. When you're laying out your garden, that garden is going to be a big part of your prepper homesteader lifestyle. You're going to spend a lot of time out there, and you want to make your garden rows in sufficient length that you can every year know about what the yield is going to be. And when I say that, on my homestead, when I set up my gardens, I made sure that I had 100-foot long rows. Well, what did that do for me? Well, that allowed me to make sure that if I have a 50-foot row, I know I have half of that. If I have a 100-foot row, I know exactly what that's going to give me. For example, I know that 6-week beans, a 100-foot row, is going to give me about 2 bushels. Corn, a 100-foot row, is going to give me about a bushel of corn. Does that make sense? I know how much each row is going to give me. And that goes for potatoes and sweet potatoes. And so I know how much to plan for. So if I know that I didn't have enough sweet potatoes last year, I can come back and go, okay, I was short by this many months and I had this many rows, so I need to add this many rows in order to cover that. Does that make sense? That way you know from year to year what your yields are and you become accustomed to that. Now there's going to be bad years and there's going to be good years. But the standard row lets you know how much fertilizer you're going to use every year so you can order appropriately and plan appropriately. Setting the size of your rows allows for planning that most people just don't think about. Number 3, when you're planning your pastures, you need to lay your pasture out in such a way that you have at least 3 paddocks, because the life cycle of parasites is something around 3 months. So you need to be able to rotate your animals every 3 months from one paddock to another. And that helps break the life cycle and cuts down on the amount of parasitic antithelmintic medications that you have to give them. Now, you should have at least 3, 4's better, rotation spots, and someplace separate for the winter. Some homesteads can do that, some can't. It all depends on the size. But if at all possible, a 3 pasture or 4 pasture rotation works out so much better than just a single pasture at one time. Plus, it allows your pastures to grow back. So as they come back each time, and the poo's already on there to fertilize them, so they grow generally pretty good to come back, and they come back year after year, and you rotate off. But you want to be able to leave your animals on the pasture long enough that they don't just eat their favorites. Okay? Now, that's one of those things they'll go through and just eat what they like the best, and then they'll stop eating anything else, and your pasture will grow up in things like thistles and weeds. And you want to leave them there long enough to eat the entire pasture down. Okay? And you want to make your pastures the right size for the load of animals that you're going to have, and you're only going to learn that as time goes by. So set up your original pasture so that it's easy for you to segment it off. You can do one big pasture to begin with and plan for the segments as you see what your animals are going to eat in a certain period of time. The kitchen garden, number 4. The kitchen garden should be close to the kitchen. Your garden should be close to the kitchen. Now, in case of a SHTF, there's no gasoline available, you'll be glad that you kept your gardens close to the house. But in the days of the golf carts and the mules and the side-by-sides and all this stuff, keeping the gardens close is not as important. But it could get very important. So plan appropriately so that you could have your gardens close to the house in case something happens. Lawn. How much grass do you want around your house? Well, most homesteaders, when I was a kid, Paul had a little bit of grass, what he could mow in an hour with a push mower, and that's all he had for grass. The rest of his homestead was used for everything. So, and he was a coal miner too, so he didn't want to spend a whole lot of time cutting grass. So plan your homestead appropriately. A pre-taken care of lawn with outlined areas that are low maintenance goes a long way to helping you do the other things on your homestead that should take precedence. So do that. Children. Now, Crystal and I, when we moved here, we were older, so we weren't as concerned about children. Of course, now we're seeing those grandchildren come along, so it's a little more of a concern. But try and have them a play area close to the house so you can keep an eye on them, and then make it such that it's kind of fenced off from the road where nobody's going to be looking over there and that kind of thing. Also, it keeps the kids from looking off and kind of wandering away. A fenced-in place would be nice, kind of pasture for children, but you know we're not going to call it that. So, but always have a plan for those littlest ones too. They're the future of your homestead. Okay, we've got through the first 6. Let's go to number 7. Your compost pile. Now, every homestead needs a compost pile. Now, I don't use compost on my garden, but I do use compost around Crystal's flower beds, in my plant beds in the spring, and in the cups that I use to plant. Now, sometimes I use bought compost, but hopefully I'm trying to get to the point to where I have my own compost. I'm not there yet. Another one of those things that you've got to get to as you get to it. Your compost pile should be between your barn and your garden. The reason being is waste from the garden goes in the compost pile and waste from the barn goes in the compost pile. That way the two are close together and you're not having to lug stuff all the way across your farmstead. You know, you can have that compost pile nice and centered in between the two, or really closer to the garden works out better, but in between the garden and the barn, so you don't have to go all the way around the garden to dump your barn waste. So the compost pile needs to be between the barn and the garden, preferably closer to the garden. Now, trees. Everybody wants trees on your homestead. Fruit trees, even shade trees. A shade tree is awful nice out close to your garden that's not shading your garden, that you can sit a lawn chair in so that you're out there working and you really need to sit down and take a break. You can go over to that shade tree and sit in your lounge chair and have a cold beverage. Could be an adult beverage, whatever kind of beverage you want, and sit there and enjoy the shade. But you need to plan for your trees. You can't just go planting trees willy-nilly. You need to look at the spread. When you purchase a tree to be planted on your homestead, plan for the spread of the tree. How wide is it going to be? How tall is it going to be? Is it going to shade other things? You know, you have to look at all these things because trees are going to deliver all the fruit and things you need. Now, you may go to a homestead that already has some fruit trees, and some of them may not have been planned well and are in bad places, and don't be afraid to take them out. A grown fruit tree puts out an awful lot of fruit, probably more than two people could eat in a year. If you've got, for example, when we came to this property, we decided to lay out an orchard. Now, your orchard shouldn't be down in a valley. If you've got a hilled property like we do, our property's a combination of flats and hills, and there's low spots, and you're better off to put your fruit trees up on top of the hill. Now, I know that might seem counterproductive. They're up there in the wind when it's cold and all that stuff. But the truth is, cold settles into low places. So when in the spring the wind dies down and your fruit trees are blooming in April, then what happens is, if your fruit tree's down in that low valley portion of your homestead, the cold will settle down into that valley and kill your fruit, kill the blooms, so that you don't wind up with fruit. So up on a hillside's a little bit better, something well drained, but something that's going to get enough. But it may mean that you have to go water them. That first year, you may have to water your fruit trees. That first year or two, to help them make it, because they're up there on that exposed hill. But eventually, they won't require that kind of maintenance. But they'll be up there above, and the frost will happen below. Believe it or not, that wind blowing will help you not have as much frost up there on those trees up on the hill. And when you plan your orchard, plan your trees so that they don't shade one another, so that they don't compete with one another. There's something called the drip edge of a tree. So a tree's roots go out as far as the drip edge, and sometimes even a little bit further than where the rain drips from the leaves. So you need to plan not to have your trees, even when they're full grown, competing with one another. Plant your full grown trees to the back, to the northern side of your orchard, and plant your dwarf trees on the southern side of your orchard. That will make it so dwarfs and semi-dwarfs in between. Number 9. Well, when we look at a homestead, working outside is always dirty. You know, you go to the barn, you're shoveling, you're getting stuff on you, you haul it to the compost pile. That day, when you go back to your house, do you want to carry all that inside? So it's nice to have a place where you can take your clothes off before you go in the house. Something that will be close to a shower. A shower close to the outside of your home. We're building a new bathroom on what was our old back porch that has a full-size shower in it, so that if I need to, I can shuck what's on and go straight in and take a shower and not carry the stuff that hits the fan into my house. So that's a good thing to have. If you can't have that, a nice solar outside shower would be wonderful as well. Number 10, the barn. Where to place it. Now, some people will buy a homestead and they will have a barn already there. And they don't really have a whole lot of choice about placement of the barn. Well, the barn needs to be within earshot of the house. But it would be nice, and you will appreciate, having your barn downwind of your house. Let me say that again. You will appreciate having a barn downwind of your house. But be cognizant of your neighbors. Try not to put your barn upwind of their house. That's just being considerate. Alright, if you have an easterly wind and you have a normal easterly wind comes from the west and blows toward the east, then you don't want to put your barn to where that easterly wind is going to blow over your neighbor's house. That's just rude. And they will consider it as rude too. If you're not used to this lifestyle, and they'll not understand that you didn't understand. So look at the weather patterns, the wind patterns on your homestead, and place your barn appropriately so that it doesn't blow on your neighbor's house and it doesn't blow on your house. Because wherever the wind blows, that's where the smell goes and the flies go. Now, flies are going to be a thing regardless. But you need to be able to hear what's going on at your barn from the house. That's important too. Number 11, storage space. You need to plan for your homestead to have enough storage space to set up to take care of your freezers. For example, Crystal and I have 4 freezers that we store stuff in. Now look, we just grow enough food for me and her, and we have 4 freezers. We also have a very large pantry that we use to store jars and to store canned goods and that kind of stuff. You're going to need to plan for storage on your place, and you need to plan for a heated storage. Because in the wintertime, if you live in zones, let's say 7 and above, you're going to have freezing weather that just an enclosed building won't be enough. Okay? And in the summer, if you're from zone 6 down, in the summer, it's going to be too hot to store things outdoors, out of climate control. So you need to be thinking about those kinds of things as you come to them. Now, some people, they'll say, well, I store my beans and don't have a problem. And okay, I'm just telling you, you need to plan for that kind of storage. Now, a lot of people are going to disagree with some of these things that we do. Well, if you're doing a prepping video and somebody's not disagreeing with you, you're not trying hard enough. So I'm not worried. If you disagree with some of these things, put it down in the comments. We'll be glad to discuss it down there. Number 12, plan a space for a home workshop. A place where you can have your hand tools, because you're going to need mechanics tools, you're going to need carpentry, woodworking tools, you're going to need all these different kind of tools, And it's nice to have a place that you can go in, if you can keep it clean enough, that you can go in and work when the weather is inclement. So plan for a workshop space. But now that workshop space needs to be close to the house, because that would be a target for those who would want to get what you have. So you want to keep that in a spot where you can secure it and hear what's going on. Plus, it's always nice to be able to be around the workshop and still have the kids be able to go out and play, and your wife holler at you, it's time for dinner. Okay? So it's good to have your workshop in close proximity to your house. Number 13. Plan for sheds and storage spaces. You're going to need plenty of storage space on your property for wheelbarrows, hoes, rakes, all these outdoor implements, and you don't want to store them in your workshop. You want to have plans for a shed, because those things are going to be used outside, going to be used in the garden. It might be nice to even plan a series of small sheds, something close to your garden, something close to your workshop, something close to your yard. So be sure to lay out the way you want to handle sheds and things. Number 14, a cold storage space. Now, it would be wonderful if you could have a cold storage space. Crystal and I are contemplating that and working on it, but we haven't got there yet. Again, a homestead is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. It's going to take you a long time. Try not to get too many projects at the same time. Now, when you start at my age, like I did, with a full-blown homestead, we went from a half-acre homestead to a 10-acre homestead. When you do that, it's easy to get too many projects at once, and one project suffers while another project is on hold, while another project is. If you can do it project to project in some kind of logical order, you're a lot better off. But now, planning for a cold storage, it could be just a space in a basement that's insulated, and you allow winter outside air to come in. You generally don't have to have a cold storage much in the summer, but a wintertime cold storage so that your potatoes don't sprout as bad, that kind of thing. You keep your onions and garlic a little bit longer. Those would be nice to have. Number 15. Fencing. When you set up your barn, you don't want to be at a place where you have to lead your animals to the pasture from the barn. I know. If you're a regular person who's dealt with this all your life, you understand that. But this is for the people who don't necessarily understand that. Your barn needs to be a place where you can release your animals into each one of the paddocks without having to lead them. Okay? Now, you can lead them if you want to feed them in the paddock. That's fine. You know, they'll follow you anywhere you've got the feed. Okay? They're going to go where you've got the feed. So you can take them and have it set up so that you put their feed station in a specific paddock. You could do that. But the easiest way is to be able to release them from the barn to go straight to the paddock through a fenced walkway. So a series of gates that allows you to close off one section or open a section. But remember, sheep and goats sometimes have a hard time figuring out which way to go. So you may have to help them if you make your paddock situations too complicated. Okay, too many twists and turns, or they got to go around this gate and go all the way around. They'll get confused and won't be able to make it back to the barn. So try and lay out your fields in a common sense way that's a straight shot from one paddock to the next from the barn. Number 17. Well, we've got all this stuff we've talked about, but you need to have a special space for the following items. You need to have a space for your laundry. Okay? That might be in the house. Laundry can be kept in a small area, especially if you have a washer and dryer, stacked washer and dryer. A laundry space may not have to be that big. For us, we moved our laundry from the back porch into the basement so that we could turn the back porch into a downstairs bathroom. You need to have room for freezers, and that's plural, freezers, because when you freeze stuff, it's so much easier than canning that you're going to find that you like to have a lot of freezer space. Because if you eat out of your freezers and you eat mostly what you grow, it takes a lot of freezer space. You need to have a place to store wood. If you're going to heat your house with wood, you can plan on probably going through maybe 4 or 5 cords, depending on the size of your house and the efficiency of your stove, 4 or 5 cords a winter. Plan appropriately for your heat source and the storage of the materials for your heat source. Okay, we talked about your orchard a little bit, about the size of the trees. Well, don't plan your orchard to be around where your garden is. If you've got full-size trees, they're going to provide full-size shade. Garden and shade are a no-no. So plan your trees appropriately. Now, I remember when I was a kid, my grandmother, we had our garden, Mom and Dad's garden, and Granny's garden. We lived on her same plot of ground. Went down toward the river. Well, between us and the river was a set of trees. And Granny, every few years, would go and cut the little trees down that had grew up at the back of the garden because it shaded her garden. It was on the southern side, and it would shade her garden, so she would cut those trees down. So plan that appropriately. Number 19. This is the last one. If and when you get ready to raise livestock, buy your livestock local from somebody you can ask questions to. Now, you can go to the local auction and buy your goats and sheep and stuff, but 9 times out of 10, the stuff they take to the auction is stuff that they needed to get rid of. So they might be getting rid of them because they're a pain on their fences. They might be getting rid of them because they get out all the time. They might be getting rid of them because they're getting mean. You know, little billies, they're nice to begin with, but they can get mean real quick. Rams are the same way. So take that with a grain of salt as far as it goes to going to the auction to buy your livestock. You can do that. Homesteaders are probably not going to make money off the sale of livestock unless you have a great big place where you can run a lot of livestock. Okay, but when you're first starting out, buy your livestock local from somebody you can call and ask questions. You know, you can call them and go, hey, my sheep is getting hot spots on their knees. What do I need to do? Or the flies are eating my sheep's butt up. What do I need to do? Well, that's called fly strike, and there's things that you can do about that. And not everything you search on the internet is going to give you the information you need. Internet searches are not the end-all be-all. Live, intelligent people who've raised livestock for years and years and years, they've seen it all. Okay, there's very few things, because vet bills will destroy any profit you might have off your homestead, and they will also destroy any savings that you might have by eating the animals that come off your homestead. Vets are important. It's important to take your animals to them when they need it. But the less you can take your animals to the vet because you know what to do, or because that mentor that you've selected knows what to do, you'll be a lot better off. That's just a few things that you should look for as you start on this homestead journey. It's going to be a lot of work. Try not to get too many projects on at once. And just know this, it's going to take you years and years and years to get your homestead to what you want. Plan for your homestead for your old age, because that's a SHTF that happens to all of us unless we die young. So plan your homestead such that in your old age you can continue on without having a problem. I want a homestead into my 70s. You know, I'm in my 50s now. I want a homestead into my 70s. So I'm trying to design my homestead, and I'm trying to show everybody else how to lay out things so that when you're 70 years old, you can still get out and work in your garden. You probably won't be able to do what I do now. But if I'm able to grow a part of my food, maintain that taste, get that exercise, that's a good thing. Now, if you like this kind of stuff, this homesteading, do-it-yourself, prepping kind of thing, be certain to come on out to the channel and subscribe. We do this every week, sometimes one video, sometimes 5. It all depends on what's going on in the homestead that week. Now, if you hit the little bell, it will notify you when we upload a video. We upload every Sunday. So with that being said, it's time for me to get on to the next thing.